is up, everyone? Happy Tuesday to you. We are making it through the week. I just had the best red pepper quesadillas. I'm sorry, it was great. Awesome. You know, I if you follow this channel and if you miss this, you can definitely catch this on the replay. But you guys know who follow my channel. Oh, I was waiting for that. But you guys know my eyes are watery. Let's put that on a pause. There we go. So, you guys know that I am like a habitual thinker. I think about like everything. I'll connect dots. I'll try to figure out how things correlate. And so, in my last live stream, I was just kind of reviewing that video. And first off, I want to say that, in that last live stream, I mentioned that, Japheth was a mention and then we don't hear about him again in the Bible. And that is true. But we do read about Japheth's descendants, okay? Because Japheth has a descendant that was called Gog from the land of Magog. Okay. And if you know where Magog is today, it is what we know as modern day Russia. All right. So Japheth did have a descendant in that region. And Gog was used in the Bible to execute the God of Abraham's judgment on his nation. And, that did not take me down the rabbit hole of thought. What took me down the rabbit hole of thought was actually just running back Tucker Carlson's Amfest speech. He gave a speech, and I believe his speech followed right after Ben Shapiro started name checking him amongst other conservatives. And then Tucker gives this great speech. And let me see if I got it teed up. And if I don't, I'll pull it up. But he gives this great speech about, treating people fairly. And, you can kind of hear the tone of Tucker's voice that Tucker isn't speaking to he's not speaking to just the Turning Point Amfest crowd. He's speaking to those who he feels like coordinates against other people in this country. And so Tucker, he goes on, and let me find that again, his Amfest speech real quick, because I thought his speech was great. I mean, I thought that Martin Luther King would be proud of him, even though he was speaking in the interest of the white man. You know, I thought that, he had some universal truths that could be applied to every countryman in America, not just the white man. But obviously, like I said in my last video, I don't expect for Tucker Carlson to speak in the interest of every countryman in this nation. I do expect for him to speak on behalf of his own interest group, which is in this case are white men, right? And there's something that we need to talk about with white men, right? Because I don't want to get too. I'll get into Tucker in a second. When you think about white men, and went on a white supremacy research. I just wanted to see how the white supremacists feel. Okay, I wanted to understand their argument, right? And, one of the things that I've said in my previous video is that white supremacy in America boils down to the white Christian that's not a Zionist, and the white Jewish Zionists and their Christian Zionist counterpart. That's really what white supremacy boils down to. They're battling for ideological supremacy, right? And a lot of this has, like I said, religious backgrounds, like a religious basis, right? But I also think that there's some ancient background to this too. And I think that when you go and you break down the characters of certain people, let's just say the sons of Japheth, right? Again, Japheth was one of Noah's sons. And the one thing that we know about Japheth and Japheth's descendants is that they were not cursed. Okay? They weren't cursed. And, one thing that I continue to ponder on with the Most High is what made Canaan's sons cursed, right? But then when you go back and you look at the ancient Canaanites and what they inclined themselves to do, killing their babies, sacrificing their babies, reckless prostitution, right? You're talking Sodom and Gomorrah. These people were disgusting, they were wicked, and the most defiling thing of all was that they were sacrificing their children to satanic idols. So these people truly were wicked. And I think that for some people, I think we live in an age of information. I think that it's probably a disappointment that Black people, descendants of Africans, are not those cursed descendants. That those cursed descendants actually came out of what we know as Arabs. And from all the many Arab nations, whether they were Jewish or Muslims or whatever those descendants, they are the descendants of Canaan. And I told, like I said, you don't need to believe me. All right. I don't want you to believe me. What I want you to do is I want you to go and I want you to look up Canaan's sons. Okay. And I said this in my last post. Go and look up Canaan's sons, right? And then I want you to cross-reference the names of his sons' nations to the existing nations and people today. And this is where you're going to realize that no, Canaanites, Canaan, the curse of Canaan, it didn't apply to the Africans. None of the Africans were hit by that curse, but the nations that were created in lieu of Canaan. Because remember, back in those days, if you founded a land, you were the father of the land. Most of the times, the land would be named after you. So Canaan, right? He founded that land that we know as Canaan, or the land we know as Israel, right? That's where he settled. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he settled there, right? But you go back and you look at history and you look at Canaan's sons, all right? And you will realize that, let me just do a quick Google search here. Where did Canaan's sons set up their, oh, wait a minute. All right, so let's look at the nations that Canaan's sons formed, right? Right, and all of these nations were in what we know as ancient Levant, okay? Sidonians, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zamorites, Hamorites. So these people, if you go and you look at these modern day lands, it would be Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. These are Arab nations, what we know of as Arab nations, not African. So the sons of Canaan were not Africans. They were Arabs. So Canaan was the father of the Arabs. Therefore, if those who call themselves Jews, if they're saying we were the people in the Levant, your people are Canaanites. And I know that doesn't sit well with you, being the cursed people in the Bible versus the favored people, but that is the reality of the situation. And it's easier for y'all to put your curse on Black people than to just admit that your people are the descendants of Canaanite, not mine. But off of that, there's another reoccurring thing that they say that had me thinking about this basal Eurasian gene. And, first of all, they don't have any definitive theories. They got theories, but they don't know, from a genetic standpoint, exactly what the root of the basal Eurasian gene is. They have all kinds of things. Oh, it was around the Ice Age, and how is it that these people don't have any Neanderthal gene and everything? And when you think about, that basal Eurasian gene, right? Whoever carries that gene, they are pretty much stripped of the womb, right? They don't have any Neanderthal genealogy in it. And I think we all can agree that, black looking people were the Neanderthals. And I think if we go back to our Bible, because the Bible is the most accurate account of human history. And if you look at the Bible and you look at some of the things that these people are theorizing, right? You'll realize that, the Bible answers a lot of questions. Like basal Eurasian, I would argue that that started with Noah. Because again, if you read the ancient biblical accounts, Noah came out looking white. He came out with an eye color that was different than the people on earth. He came out with a skin color that was different than the people on earth. Arguably, the basal Eurasian gene started after the flood, and it started with Noah. And the interesting pattern that I see, though, is that not all of Noah's descendants carried it. Because when you start to kind of think about the sons of Japheth, the sons of Japheth did not carry it. And when you look at these little these people who do all this genetic, mapping and stuff, they're not really targeting the sons of Japheth or the descendants of Japheth with this basal Eurasian gene, but they are targeting these Arab populations with the basal Eurasian gene. And my personal theory is that particular ghost gene, that gene is a marker of the Canaanites because it kind of reoccurs in the Levant and in these Arab groups. And again, because their father was Canaan, I believe that basal Eurasian gene, if they were to kind of look at this honestly, I think that that gene was dominant in the ancient Levant when Canaan and his descendants settled on that land. And I believe that the curse, the distinction, the marker, and they are going to say that this is, I am not trying to be rude or insensitive or shame anybody when I say this, but I personally believe that people who carry the basal Eurasian nose, they have the Achilles nose, that arch nose. And they will try to say in Roman culture that the arch nose or the Roman nose, there's no such thing as the Roman nose. That nose came from the Levant. And the Roman culture was not homogenous. Rome was like America. It was a immigrant type of place. It's like everybody come as you are and we'll all be Romans. But when you look at the DNA sequence of Rome, there was no Roman gene at all. But they had a 50% of the individuals when they're digging up and doing DNA traces, 50% of those people came from the Mediterranean. So I say this to say that descendants of Canaanites, I personally believe that they are the carriers of the basal Eurasian gene. And I bet you if they were super duper honest, like these scientists, they're going to lie because they're trying to protect identities that are lies. But if they're super duper honest, they will probably admit that the reoccurring thing to that gene is that nose. It is the nose that is the marker for those people who are descendants of Canaanites. And I personally believe that that, quote, ghost gene is a gene that was inherited by descendants of Canaanites. That is what makes them cursed in some degree, but it's also the behaviors and the inclinations. And when we look at different cultures of people and how they evolved and what they kind of tie back to, the reoccurring theme is the practices of the Canaanites. So my thing is, when we look at the sons of Canaan who were cursed, and then we look at the descendants of Japheth, One of the things that you see throughout history is that the descendants of Japheth recognized that they needed to delineate themselves from the individuals were descendants of Canaan. And the number one argument for white supremacists is the dilution factor of their race. The dilution factor of their race, and for this is their arguments, not mine. They believe that Jewish people have directly put a threat on the homogeny of their race because they, according to them, they need to pass looking like them. And when I read that, I'm like, that's interesting, until I went back to what this Jewish lady told me. She said, I'm a Jewish woman, but I don't look Jewish. And it kind of made me think, so you acknowledge that there is a specific look to your people. So this is not anti anything. You are saying this through your own lips, that you recognize that your particular people have a distinctive look to them. And that was very interesting. So when I hear, these white supremacist type of people talk about the preservation of their race, their bloodlines, their purities, these people are kind of backtracking to their ancestors. And when I look at what the sons of Japheth has actually done to the descendants of Canaan over the centuries, England, France, Spain, Portugal, all identified something about that particular group of people. You got to think about it. Of all the groups of people in humanity that have formed throughout the millenniums, right? Why is it in modern times only one specific group is being expelled or forced to convert from their idealisms and ways and behaviors? Like, I mean, you can play the victim card and say this is anti Semitic, or you can kind of peel back the layers of some of your people and say somebody's doing something that's making these people uncomfortable, that they think that our people are a threat to their very existence, and they need to kick us out of their countries, right? And I think the sons of Japheth, I think that they have worked very, very hard. I would say even in the last, I want to say at least 3 decades, to delineate who they are from their cousins, now their cousins, that say that they are Jewish, because I think that they're kind of getting like black people in America. A lot of people will say that black people delineating from other black people is racist, but it's not for us. You can be your group of black people, and we're going to be the foundational black Americans, right? Because from a cultural preservation standpoint, there are people that look like us that do not act in our interests. And this is what I believe the white Christian man that's not a Zionist, like Tucker Carlson, I think that's kind of his point, is like, guys like me are being disenfranchised. We are being wiped out. We are being diluted. And as much as people want to say the replacement theory is racist, you got to kind of dig back the premise of why people are saying things exist, and then the patterns of other people. There are a lot of individuals who say that they are Jewish, who will wear the badge of being Jewish when it's convenient with them, but when it keeps them safe, they are white all the way. They can chameleon back and forth if they can actually pass. And this is what this Jewish woman, her statement was very interesting to me, that she can pass for a white woman. And it's like, I didn't even know that that was on y'all minds, to be passing for anything that you're not. Like, and my whole thing is, it just says a lot. It says a lot about the mindset of people, that that you're passing for another race, and you're claiming that you're this race. But anyways, looking into this, I believe that the issue with the white Christian that's not a Zionist, and the white Jew, and the Zionist crew in general, I think it really boils down to how they are approaching their beliefs in God. I think the non-Zionist Christian, his their approach to God, their belief in God, I do believe that it's way more purely intended than these Zionist Christians. And so when you look at people like Tucker Carlson, right, you're like, would you take a Tucker Carlson or would you take a Zionist Christian? I take a Tucker Carlson all day, because I don't personally believe, and I could be wrong, Tucker Carlson could be a complete KKK member behind the closed doors, sipping Kool-Aid while they talk racist about everything. I don't know. But it seems like white guys like Tucker are not racist. They actually do have this sense of moral compass from their idea of Jesus. And, they just want everything to be fair, and more so fair for the white guy, right? Black people, we got to fight for ourselves, that's just what it is. But anyways, I think the bigger thing is that the sons of Japheth, they have a moral compass. They have the descendants of Japheth, they have a moral compass. They were not cursed to not have a moral compass. And so I think when you get into some of the just horrible, wicked things throughout Christianity that might have had a white face to it, I kind of believe, I kind of agree with Candace Owen to some degrees, because if you peel back and delineate white people, you kind of understand how the respective segments within white America operate, and they're all not the same wicked person. They're not, and it's just like Jews too. Jews are not all of them are the same wicked people. But I do believe that the non-Zionist white Christian has a more pure idea of just humanity than the Zionist. And that's why they're being shut down so much, is because we live in a Zionist world. This is Satan's system now. And so the Zionist sect of Christianity and Judaism, they are running things, they are corrupting things, and there's really nothing that anybody else can do at this point. But if you are a faithful Christian and you're doing the best you can based off of how you've learned the word, if you are a committed, faithful Jew, and you're doing the best you can based off of your understanding, not of the Talmud, but at least just the laws, right, on how to be a basic, decent human being, these Zionist Christians and Jews, they are making you guys look terrible. And the problem is they can actually camouflage into being you. So when you feel like you're attacked and you feel like things are being generalized, just know that it is your own people that are actually causing these scenarios. So I agree with Candace Owens. It's not all of the white men and women. It's not all of the white men and women. It's only the ones that have bowed down to Zionism. And these are, to me, the sons of Japheth, who aligned with the evil Canaanites. And they are the ones ruling the world today. Did you know, I didn't even know this, 85 to 90% of the Jewish population live in only two countries. The second beast, indeed, the United States and Israel. That is where the majority of their people live. And that is very, very fitting, because like I said, where the feet mix with iron and clay in Daniel's prophecy, and obviously America is the iron Israel is the clay. And so it does make sense that demographically we look like this because we're the second beast. So let me know what you guys think. I've been digging into, I know this is a weird thing, but I have been researching the mindsets of white supremacists in America. I want to understand my oppressors, or at least the people that hate me. You know what I mean? If you hate me, you know what I mean? And it's just very interesting to me when I dig into, you know, I feel like a lot of the white person's beef with black people really stems from, like, I feel like black people in America has been used almost as like frontline shields, and this is where you get that, black and white turmoil, because I think that I think a lot of black people look at all white people indiscriminately as being their oppressors. Some of them don't want to delineate. And then I think some people, and I think Candace Owens kind of triggered into me, it's like, well, we actually do have to delineate amongst these white people because they're all not operating on the same wavelength. And even during slavery, it's undeniable that one oppressor treated their slaves much, much worse than the other ones. And when we get into which oppressor would be inclined to torture their slaves, is it's more likely, I'm not talking about whipping them, keeping them in line. I'm talking about outright torturing, taking the men and forcing them to have sex with the slave owner so that you can butt break them, things like that. I'm going to give that to the descendants of the Canaanites, not the descendants of Japheth, because I don't think that those people are cursed enough to do those horrible things like those people who are descendants of Canaanites. And they go by different names. And so, just so you guys know how these people chameleon throughout history, right? Descendants of Canaan, they were the Canaanites. They became Jews. They also, in ancient times, they are the Philistines. They are the Phoenicians. They are the Khazars. I think a lot of those Anatolian people were the descendants of Canaanites. So when you follow kind of where some of these people went and some of the behaviors of some of these people, the Philistines, the Khazars, some of these people, the patterns of the ancient Canaanites are undeniable. They're undeniable. And I would really love a geneticist to confirm truthfully if that basal Eurasian ghost gene originated dominantly in the Levant, because reoccurringly we are seeing it is really deeply rooted from the Middle Eastern Arab populations. And again, I believe that that was a marker for the ancient Canaanites. And I believe that those people look distinctive as well. Because I will say this, the sons of Japheth, their noses look different. Just like when you go and you look at Constantine, Constantine was not a white man. He was not a Eurasian. I don't think that Constantine he was not a son of Japheth. He was a descendant of Canaanites. And we know that because of Constantine's nose. There is no such thing as a Roman nose. It is a basal Eurasian nose. And I just really wish, and you can just hit me up on the low if you're a geneticist that, you're scared to kind of say things aloud, but tell the truth. If you were really to kind of put a depiction on that people who carry that basal Eurasian gene, you're going to see something very distinctive about their facial features. And that is what they don't want people to really acknowledge. That sons of Japheth, they don't have that facial feature because they were not cursed to have it. But God, the God of Abraham, was always going to remind us of what the Canaanite descendants looked like. And even when the Israelites did not fully eradicate them and they went on to rebrand themselves as this and that or whatever, right? Their features never changed. And that's why I believe that when the white supremacists or the Aryan whites are talking about their race is being diluted, if I had the basal Eurasian gene, I'd be trying to find me a hot white guy too to up the chances of my children not being passed on with that feature. And and it's not being offensive because a lot of these people get their kids' nose broken at very early ages so that they don't have to grow up with it. So the God of Abraham gave the Canaanite, I believe, that is the most logical excuse for that basal Eurasian gene. It was so that humanity could always know who those descendants are. Because even when you go and look at the ancient artifacts, this gives it away. This gives it away. This gives who the descendants of Canaanites away. And let me know if you've looked at some ancient art and if you can rock with this theory about that basal Eurasian ghost gene, right? That Canaan's descendants were deprived. They were deprived the Neanderthal gene, which is very critical to a lot of people. This is, I mean, honestly, it's a beauty gene. It's a beauty. We all get our beauty from the womb. Black people, white people, all the nations that form all of us, we get our beauty from Africa. But if God said that your people can't have that beauty, they can't be desirable looking, from a genetic standpoint, right? They're going to have to go and get it. They're going to have to create it for themselves by intermingling with other races. So let me know what you guys think. But I think that the higher probability of the basal Eurasian gene is the curse of Canaan. And I really feel like if people, because I read these papers and they always kind of like, you can tell the writer is trying to dance around by saying, we don't know, it could be. And hey, I'm looking at this from a biblical perspective, right? I'm looking at this from what the Bible says. Like, who could have been who could have brought the basal Eurasian gene into existence in the first place, or at least the Eurasian gene? Noah. It's very high probability because the book of Enoch, which is an ancient text, tells us that Noah came out with lighter skin. So it is very possible that Noah was the one that introduced the basal Eurasian gene into the genetic pool after the flood. But I think that, or I'm sorry, the Eurasian gene, not the basal Eurasian gene, the Eurasian gene. I think Noah was the one that introduced the Eurasian gene, but the basal Eurasian ghost gene, I think that originated with those people, the descendants of Canaan. Because I feel like when you start looking at how they keep tracking the ancestry of that gene, it's in that little central area, and I feel like they're even lying. They know that the Natufians had that gene. And they know who the descendants of, like I said, and the Natufians were the ones who supposedly were the first group to settle in Jericho. And Jericho, obviously, land of Canaan at that time. So I believe that is a mutation gene, and that gene gives out a certain facial feature marker that will forever mark the descendants of Canaan. That is my belief, because if I go and look at these white guys in Europe, If they come from pretty homogenous places, they they kind of look a certain way that people who carry that gene don't look like. And again, through migration, you're going to probably see that gene pop up in different areas. And then when you go and look at those people, the thing that is, to me, the reoccurring theme is the noses of the people in the population. It's very distinctive. Very. So let me know what you guys think. Tucker Carlson, just getting back to him, he inspired this because it's obvious. It is obvious. And I think when you look at Ben Shapiro at AmFest and you look at Tucker Carlson, I was just sitting up there like, wow, the sons of Japheth is really going at the sons of Canaan right now, the Canaanite sons, because that's what Ben Shapiro is. He's a descendant of Canaanites. And that's not being rude or mean or anything like that. It's just true. You know, I don't know about the European ones, the German ones. I mean, because obviously, they probably are too, because they probably got those markers. But I will say that they look different than the ones from the Middle East. They definitely look different. Like, you can actually, to me, there's something very, very distinctive about, like, the genetic the facial structure of German Jewish people and those Middle Eastern Jews. Even with all of that mixing, they look different. And I think it boils down to how much of the basal Eurasian gene did the German population get. And it's very diluted when you actually go hardcore Europe. I mean, you would think a gene that has Eurasian in it would actually be very dominant in basal Eurasian. That is, that it would have Eurasian in it. They would be dominant in Europe, but it's not. It's dominant in the Levant. Like, that ancestry goes back to the Levant. And they even classify this gene as a separation from the Africans, right? So it's a very rare gene, too. That's another thing to say. Very rare. It's very rare. A very small population of people have it. So do what you want with that information, but I'm looking at just all of this information and I'm just like, I can see why the sons of Japheth would beef so hard with the sons of Canaan, because from a stolen identity standpoint, I'm pretty sure that, Black people can relate to that too, right? I think that is their argument. And this is, again, I'm not saying that I agree with these arguments, but again, I'm studying the mindsets of the white supremacists. And it seems to be that they feel like there is a track record of stealing their identity. And it's crazy because Black Americans have felt the same way all this time. So, anyways, yeah, we have no basal Eurasian. We are West Eurasian complex too. That's what I'm saying. Basal Eurasians likely moved out of Africa after other Eurasians. I don't believe that. I believe that gene, to me, I don't, like, if I could think about that migration happening, it was when, again, when we go to Noah, right? The Bible tells us that his sons branched out, right? His sons and their descendants, they branched out so that they started to populate the earth again. But again, when you think about kind of the track record of it, right? Nobody else's ancestry separated from the Neanderthal, marker, except for one distinct group. And I believe that that distinct group came from Canaan. And when you think about it, and this lady's like, this dude kept arguing with me. And this is what really triggered me to go into the basal Eurasian gene. I was kind of led over there because he kept saying there was no African ancestry in the Levant, right? Dude kept saying that to me. There's no African ancestry. It's crazy. There's no African ancestry in the Levant. And I'm like, well, we all stem from Africa. What are you talking about? Like, it would have been like some. And then I started doing my research. Like, when you start arguing with me, I'm going to start researching what you're talking about. And that is, and if you're saying that, if you believe that there is no African ancestry in the Levant, then the only explanation for you believing that is because you know that you are the basal Eurasian carriers. The only people that would say that is people who know that they are descendants of people who carry that basal Eurasian gene, because every race group has some level of Africa in it. Everybody stems from the motherland. Everybody. And again, that mutation in gene, I don't think it was a good gene. I don't think that was a good mutation at all. I think it made those Eurasian, whatever type of people, they were probably very unattractive. Very unattractive. And so, they probably needed to dilute and, kind of up their chances of having better looking offsprings. I don't know. But anyways, let me know what you guys think. But I personally do believe that the basal Eurasian gene started in the Levant. And for those who make the argument that there was no African ancestry or blood or whatever like that in the Levant, probably because of those basal Eurasians or those Canaanites who were deprived of the gift of the womb, which is beauty. You get your beauty from Africa. Everybody gets their beauty from Africa. And that's just what it is. But anyways, you guys, you said, how you feeling after grabbing Venezuelan oil? I didn't grab Venezuelan oil. Trump and his gangsters did. I didn't do nothing. Hell, the Congress didn't even know about it. And my homeboy who served, he was kind of giving me some lessons on that. And he goes, if it's a military operation less than 90 days, we could run up on any country we want to. I'm like, oh, he was like, so he didn't need approval for Congress. I'm not saying it was right, but he didn't need Congress to approve what he did. I'm like, well, that makes sense. So you mean to tell me that if Trump keeps all of his shakeups in these other countries under 90 days, he don't ever have to get the approval of Congress to do it? He's like, yeah. So here we are in the world today, I mean, obviously, America needs the natural resources. We're trying to get ourselves out of debt. And like the Roman Empire, once you are in this debt hole, debt ceiling in your country, you got to go imperialize the hell out of other countries to get your GDP back to where it needs to be. So obviously, and obviously with Venezuela, I think, like I said on one of my posts, if you're a friend to Russia, if you plan on making any type of strategic alliance with Russia, they're going to shake you up. They're going to shake you up. And I'm curious to see how all this plays out, because let's just say on the low, Venezuela secretly joined BRICS, and BRICS is operating like NATO, where if you harm one of us, you harm all of us. I'm interested in seeing the global fallout on this, because I don't think that this is just about Venezuela. And I think that even maybe the Trump administration maybe they're looking at, this will stop Russia from getting access to Venezuelan oil, because obviously they kicked the United States out of there. They kicked Exxon out of there, right? Because they're like, dude, you got this shit on our land, you harvesting our fucking oil, you got these land contracts, and our people only get 20% of the when all is said and done, and y'all walking away with 80. And obviously no smart leader of a country would let a company just rape their economy like that. And so Maduro was like, y'all got to get the fuck on with that shit. We gonna nationalize. I think Chavez did it first. Chavez was like, we gonna nationalize the oil or whatever. And Maduro stayed there. So by nationalizing it, he was like, Exxon, get the fuck out of here. It's our oil anyways. It's on our damn land. So, and I think they tried to sue, wasn't able to win. So, obviously there was some bad blood, brewing, in the oil industry towards Venezuela. All right, let's just keep the buck, right? And so Trump probably has some big oil giant, donor, like, go run and get my shit. I don't give a fuck what you do, try to skate around reality, leverage whatever loopholes you have. And Trump's guys were like, hey, well, if we can keep it under 90 days, we can just run up in that shit without even, mentioning it to Congress. And they were like, oh, shit. Go get that motherfucker. And that's exactly what they did to Maduro and his wife. And I believe that they will probably be doing that to some other South American countries, as many of them have been cordial with Russia, strategic with Russia in some kind of way. And again, they're trying to protect, the power of the United States by tapping into as many natural resources from other nations as they possibly can. That's how all empires that are on a lifeline survive, guys. And so just keep in mind that what our government does is not something that we're doing. I don't internalize any of this stuff. It's like, I'm like, oh, the United States just ran up on another country and kidnapped their president and first lady. Welcome to 2026. What do we do? What do we do but just exist in this shit? Yeah, we have no basal Eurasian. Okay, got that. What's going on, Manuel? Sorry, I don't look at my chat right away, just because I sometimes I have a thought, and even with this thought, it's still like I'm trying to be very sensitive here, right? Because I don't want Jewish people to feel attacked. Obviously, it's probably easier for some of your people to believe that my people were the cursed ones than your own. And so that's probably a reality that some of you are still grappling with, because you've been lied to about your identity, and that instead of being Israelites, you're really Canaanites. But I think that, honesty is the best policy. And I think honesty is a great way to save your mental health. Like when you're just truthful and honest about things as they happen in reality, honesty really helps the mental health. It really does. And I think honesty helps society. Honesty helps society because when we're honest about who we are, people accept us, right? People accept us, right? And, and I was just talking to one of my friends, and, she was talking about this guy we know. And she's like, he's a brutal asshole. I can't stand him. Right. And I was like, why don't you like him? Because I like the guy. I have good conversations with him. He's a straight shooter. And I feel like honesty is offensive to people. It rubs them the wrong way, especially when you speak honesty boldly, and people will start labeling you as being something that you're not, just because you're speaking with conviction and boldness, But I think that if a lot of people had more conviction and boldness about just cleaving on to the truth, we wouldn't have a lot of these issues in society. And even if you're somebody who says, I like that culture of people, right? You can admire them, right? You can even embrace it, but you don't have to, like, embrace it don't mean become it. You know, you can't immerse yourself that deep that you forget about who you are, who your people are. Because really, I think that when you think about the modern day descendants of Canaanites, they have the same opportunity and for salvation as everyone else. They really do. Like when Yahusha came, and I think that the Apostle Paul was like the best example of this, even though he was not a descendant of Canaanites, he was a descendant of Israelites. But Paul, he persecuted Christians, he killed people. And, he was able to be brought to reason, he was able to see the light. And again, he was a profound minister of the way, not Christianity, but the way in which we should walk and be as individuals. So, to me, ancestry is only a conversation when people are lying about who they are. When people are lying about who they are, when they are pretending that one group of people are inferior because they want to believe of some lie, when really, when you go back into the history, the actual inferior people are the ones that calling other people inferior. That is when, ancestry becomes a conversation. That's when you start suppressing other people from the reality of their own ancestry, labeling them racist for preserving their own ancestry because they feel like their ancestry, their culture is under attack by people who want to chameleon into any and everybody's culture. I don't understand why, anybody would think that people would not be offended by that. And that's kind of like one of the things as I'm looking at some of these arguments, you know, but I'm also looking at things and people in the broader way. It's like it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, right? At the end of the day, the Most High is going to be looking at our heart condition. And you can't have your heart condition assessed if you're not authentic. And I think that's what, a lot of people need to learn to be, is authentic. And being authentic means that you accept who you are and who you are not. So I don't want to harp on, the only reason why I'm passionate about, the identity of those who call themselves Jews is because we are allowing people to die protecting a people that are not who they say that they are. And history does not support that they are who they say that they are. And we are out here killing children in the name of the wickedness of Canaanite descendants. Like, when you want to talk about blood liable, the United States government is blood liable for the Palestinians. The United States government and the state of Israel, they are blood liable. And there is nothing good going to come from people who do the things that we do. So when I say judgment is coming upon the nations, it's definitely getting to the United States. God is not blessing America unless the God of America is Satan. And the God of America is Satan. So that's the only God blessing this nation right now. So keep your prayers up, everybody. Keep your prayers up. I don't care what your ancestry is, what you think your religion is. I think if you're searching knowledge, I would encourage people to get into their Bible themselves. Do not let your priest or your pastor or your rabbi dictate a motherfucking thing to you at this point, because this is drill time in mankind's history right now. And I personally believe that we are the judgment generations. And I think people of faith need to just start recognizing the time that we're living in. These people are going to bring us to war with all their imperialism. And the difference between the Romans going out on these imperialistic conquests back during the Roman Empire when it was collapsing, the nations that they were threatening did not have nuclear capability. And the nations that we keep playing with do. And so take what you want for that. I do believe that there's a lot of mockery of the Bible happening with a lot of this world event stuff. And when you mock the Bible, you're going to see the same judgments happen, but worse. So I personally believe that Russia is a target, because I believe that just like the Russians' ancestors, the God of Abraham are going to use them again. And that is what makes these people so fearful, because these demons know the Bible too. And that's what makes them so fearful of Russia, is because they know that when we're talking about just things happening on the earth that is inspired by the Most High, I personally believe that Russia has been made capable, and I think that they actually have capabilities that we are not aware of. And I truly believe that, once again, the God of Abraham is going to use that nation to execute his judgments in some way. So, of course, they're trying to get Russia out the game. Of course, they are looking at the imminent threat of Russia, because they know how the descendants of Russia, who are descendants of Japheth, have been used before. So in my first video, I mentioned that Japheth was a mission and we don't really hear about him anymore. That was true, but we definitely heard about Japheth's descendant later on in the Bible, and his name was Gog, from the land of Magog. So anyways, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your evening. We connect dots from what's happening in the world to the word, and we just make sense of things over here. So if you're new to this channel, if you are a person of faith, if your priest or apostate pastor has lied to you, if he has a slutty wife that runs around with see-through outfits on, right? I encourage you to kind of get yourself in Bible study with some independent folks and make sense of the word of God yourself. Get out of Babylon the Great, the harlot. Even the pastors' wives are dressing like whores these days. Y'all need to get up out of these churches. Black people, get out of these churches. Let those black apostates fall to themselves, but get back to Yahuwah. And, to the white folks, I don't know what's happening in y'all churches, but if it's the same apostasy as what we see in these black churches, y'all get out of them churches too, right? It's Babylon the Great. Study the word of God. Sometimes, what did God say? Where two of my disciples are, my spirit. And sometimes you got to get out of these churches and create your own Bible study group, and let God's spirit lead that group to understanding, and stop giving your monies to these apostates who are just giving you affirmations and not really giving you true understanding of the word of God. So anyways, you guys, have a wonderful evening. I'm coming up on exactly an hour, so I will catch you on the next one. Love your neighbors as yourself. You should not be killing kids. I don't kill kids. I don't kill kids, and I don't support genocide. What's going on, Brian? I see you. I don't support genocide. But my government, the United States of America, they support genocide. So I always like to make sure that people understand the difference between the people and the government. Most Americans do not support genocide. If we really understood the straight entitlement, satanic entitlement of those, descendants of Canaanites over there. If we really understood that, we wouldn't be supporting that shit. You know, we don't support. We love, like, I mean, and even down to these abortion clinics. These are forms of child sacrifice. And when you see who profits from them the most, right? Follow the money and follow the profit centers of abortion clinics, right? You're going to find a Canaanite descendant. Anything that is against God, you're going to find a Canaanite descendant and their money at the heart of that. And, before I go to, I thought something was very interesting. Because somebody was like, Rothschild means red child. Rothschild means red child. And what do you know? The ancient Canaanites were called red people. And I definitely believe the Rothschilds are Canaanite descendants. But the Canaanites were called red people. And when you translate Rothschild, it's red child. So Satan has marked his people very well in so many different ways. You just have to be open, and you have to be looking at the patterns of people and who they are and their influence. And just so you guys know, if you're ever worried about or you're curious about who Satan's children are today, right? You actually got to look at the people who are doing the best in the world today, right? Because this is Satan's world. So God's people are not going to be doing the best in Satan's world. No matter what these overt money worshipers or Nicolaitans, prosperity doctrine Christians want to tell you, God's people are not wealthy in Satan's world. We don't even aspire for position, wealth, accolades. That's not what we're really here for. So if you ever want to know who God's chosen people are, you got to look at the poorest in society, not the richest, not the most known. Those are not God's people. The richest people, the most wealthiest, reoccurring, even if they're not talented, they rich, those are Satan's chosen people. And they're always going to do well because they sacrifice themselves to Satan's world. So something for you guys to think about if you're on the Illuminati rabbit hole. Canaanites, red people, Rothschild, red child. They're all the same descendants. They're all the same descendants. And this world is ran by their people. And for those of you who have faith, all I can do is tell you keep your prayers up, because no weapon forms against you when you are in covenant. I actually think about people like moving on me ideologically all the time. Like, I do these YouTube videos. I try not to be rude or anything. I'm very brutally honest. But, I've often thought like somebody feeling like offensive and trying to like ruin my life over like my opinions or my research. And then I think about like my God, like, and every time I think about it, it's like, I don't believe in cursing, but my God believes in cursing. And I always think about a person moving against me as having a series of unfortunate events happening to them. And it's always been like that. I've never moved against people, but anybody who has plotted against me, who have created some kind of like issue for me, because I don't create issues for people at all. I pretty much mind my business. I always hear about a series of unfortunate events. And so I know that my God protects me and he ain't about to let nobody play with me. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Digging down the rabbit hole of the feelings of white supremacists and their sentiments towards their Jewish counterparts in America. A lot of this boils down to identity. I think a lot of it also boils down to religion. And I think when you go down and you look at even just the history of, the Roman Empire and even in England, France, Spain, Portugal, there was a reoccurring theme that is undeniable. The white guys did kick out the Jewish guys. And a lot of people, and the reoccurring thing is it was because of anti Semitism. But then when you go and look at the white guy's perspective, it was because of the way some of those people were doing business and some of the defilements in society, and even down to accusations that they were killing their Christian children. And I hate to say this, and Jewish people, you guys got to do something to rebrand your community. But why is it that, child sacrifice and all that stuff, why is it that your people are so heavily associated with that, just like the ancient Canaanites? Are they tapping into ancient ancestry? Do you guys teach your next generations not to absorb the practices and ideals of the ancient Canaanites, or are you teaching your kids to embrace that? Because, I think that there's a cycle of belief systems and supremacy that does happen in that community. And I don't even think a lot of these people have a shot at being somewhat decent people sometimes, because they're being raised by people with demonic inclinations. Like, if I can think about the cycle of homosexual men that seem to be closely related to that community, I can imagine that these young men, were not protected in some way. And so, I am very, very much interested in understanding what is the ideological premise that Jewish people raise their kids. Is it a Talmudic mindset, right? How do we get a segment of Jews who have the mindset like they do? Who is raising them? What is the communal values here where some of these people have such deviant and disgusting behavior? And I'm not saying that these deviant, disgusting behaviors is confined to just Jewish people, but it's reoccurring prevalency. And and if they're not Jewish, what do you know? They're Zionist Christians. So y'all gotta check your people, because there are some reoccurring things, and you can't say this is anti. You can't keep saying that every observation and patterns is anti. At some point, it's just going to have to be a raw observation that maybe people in your community need to address or not make so damn obvious, because it's just giving weird at this point, and it's giving descendant of Canaanite. And I'm pretty sure that the people in your community that know they're descendants of Canaanite, right? I'm pretty sure if they were abhorred by the ancient Canaanites, like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like, I'm embarrassed that those were my descendants. I'm pretty sure that they're not, going to be rocking with some of this stuff. So check your people. Check your people. Anyways, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm going to continue to obsess over the connection between the Basal Eurasian ghost gene and the ancient Canaanites. I believe there is a correlation between those people, the descendants of those people. We already know that the dominant holders of that Basal Eurasian ghost gene are Arab descent people. And again, according to the Bible, Canaan is the father of the Arabs. Canaan is the father of the ancients in the Levant. So I'd be very interested in people just telling the truth about the Basal Eurasian gene and give us an actual prototype. And you don't want to give us that, because you know that that gene has a distinct marker, and that marker is that Achilles, or however you call it, that arched nose. Yeah, I bet you know that's the distinctive marker. That is the marker of the descendants of Canaanite. That is how the Most High continued to let us know who those descendants are, because it really did not evolve. It didn't evolve, and geneticists need to be honest about that as well. But anyways, you guys, Have a wonderful rest of your day. You said, I hope that I seek is at the end of my own arm. I don't know. You know, you sound like somebody who needs some help. You should not be killing. Okay, we're good with that. So, anyways, you guys have a wonderful evening. Let me know what you think. If you are a geneticist and you are not afraid to tell the truth, anthropologist too, you know, I would love to get your honest opinion about this, take on that gene sequence. You know, is it reasonable that this traces back to those Canaanite descendants? And we already know who the descendants of Canaanites are, but let's talk about the features of those descendants, and reoccurringly, does those features show up in history? And again, Constantine, I bet you if we dug up Constantine, Constantine would have that gene because Constantine had that nose. He was actually, if you looked at the succession of a lot of those Roman emperors, they did, like, some of them had a, like, they didn't all look the same. Like, they didn't look like the same type of white guy because Rome was full of immigrants. And so, I always felt like Marcus Aurelius was a very handsome guy. Just the depictions of Marcus Aurelius, I thought that he was one of the more sensible Roman emperors. Um, but he had a very, interesting look about him. It looked more Italian. You know what I mean? And a lot of people thought that the Romans were Italians. They weren't. It was a republic of mixed people. But what tells the story of the infiltration or the influence, the Canaanite influence in the Roman Empire, is those emperors with that nose. They had Canaanite descendancy. And let me see what Nero's nose looked like. Show me a depiction of Nero. Let's see if they have any old statues. Let me see this. I don't think Nero had it. I just think he was an evil dude. He could have just been an evil dude. Nero doesn't have it. Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius doesn't have it. Marcus Aurelius doesn't have it either. But when you get to Constantine's ass, depiction of Constantine, he has it. Constantine has it. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Constantine has it. So I'm pretty sure Constantine was a descendant of Canaanites as well. But anyways, you guys, let's see. Did he? Oh my! Oh, shut up! If you don't get off my page, I know you ain't telling me to shut up. Because you could easily get your ass off my page. But yeah, Constantine definitely has that nose. And he was so narcissistic, he put that whole damn thing on Rome. Like, if I were the Romans, I'd be just so offended by that dude. Like, we gotta have your big ass face with that big ass nose just right in the middle of the damn streets looking at us. nosy ass. But anyways, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. Do your own research. I'm always operating on curiosity on this channel, but it's just really interesting to me when you start looking at the genetics of people, and then you look at the behaviors of people, and then you look at what people say. You can kind of understand why certain cultural groups do have beef with other cultural groups. And I think it's really about stolen valor and identity. And so the lesson here is be true to yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, just don't become your neighbor and assume their identity, right? Be yourself. And if you would not disrespect yourself, do not disrespect your neighbor. Bye.